Well, hello there, and welcome to day 9 of Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. Slightly different setup today because I didn't watch this on my smart TV, so it seemed a bit silly to have it in my normal setup, so I thought I would do what I like to refer to as setup 2, which is my geeky bookshelf. So today I watched the 1996 drama Freeway, a somewhat obscure film because now and then I like to dip into non-conventional, sort of off the beaten track films just to sort of vary things up. And this is definitely one of those. This was a thriller starring Reese Witherspoon and Kiefer Sutherland, and it's an odd film. It's an odd film. It was directed by Matthew Bright and produced by Oliver Stone. But were you to watch it, you really would sort of go, well, is this a sort of 90s Lifetime melodrama, or is there something more going on here? Is this sort of one of those exploitation thrillers? It's hard to say. So the plot follows a very young Reese Witherspoon, possibly one of her first credits, who plays a teenager from a very run-down, underclassed background, living in a trailer. Her mother is a prostitute, her father is on drugs, and they are immediately arrested. And she is trying to make her way to her grandmother's. And this is a film that is, like a lot of the sort of experimental dramas, it's using the Red Riding Hood story as you would use a classic story like Red Riding Hood, Snow White, Cinderella, something like that, to sort of retell it in a modern, gritty context. Very much in the same manner as something like Elliot Page would do in the film Hard Candy from the mid-noughties. Similarly, in this case, so she's a teenage girl, there is a serial killer, played by Kiefer Sutherland, who is murdering people on the IO9. So he's known as the IO9 killer, and of course that's where the Freeway title comes from. And you think the film's going to be one thing. You definitely think from the first act it's going to be a gritty social realist drama about poverty, and about how someone can really come from sort of a very vulnerable background and essentially become the victim of someone like a predatory wolf serial killer. And then the film takes a very different direction, and once you get to the end of the first act, it really goes in wild places that you think, what is this film? And there were definitely every 30, 40 minutes a point in which you're going, the film has completely changed genre from, like I said, social realist drama to a melodrama, to a horror film, to a courtroom drama, to a prison exploitation movie of all things. And you really, it's very hard to keep your footing when this film's sort of jumping left and right. But I will always credit a film for doing something wild and interesting, even if it doesn't work, than sort of go for more traditional, plain storytelling. The acting is, as you would for one of these early films, quite, I don't really know how to describe it. It's not good per se across the board, but you really see people trying. Kiefer Sutherland has moments of really putting in that dark, sort of 80s, 90s, serial killer, kind of horror film character. But it goes from someone who's quite interesting and doing some quite choice performances to possibly going into the more over-the-top, clownish performance, which I think is a shame. But Reese Witherspoon really carries this. You know, she really does. She, you know, we follow her from the beginning to the end of the film, and she, you know, with her youth, and she does go a bit melodramatic and does slightly overact in this, but you can see why even then Reese Witherspoon really went on to become a megastar, because the range in her performance is quite solid. And yeah, you do get some other early, you know, like I said, it was you know, Oliver Stone produced it, so it's clearly got some certain hallmarks. And Danny Elfman did the soundtrack, although weirdly, even though this would have been right in the midst of sort of his Simpsons era and his Batman work, it's an odd soundtrack. It definitely is this is a small drama, so I'm going to really experiment with what I'm doing musically, and it doesn't always work. But yeah, it was quite a sit. Goes to some very dark places, I have to say, and again, the social realism really goes to some heavy places. But then, on the other hand, it goes to some very over-the-top, silly places, and it does kind of get hooked on this Red Riding Hood thing a little bit too much, and at one point it gets away from it, but then it kind of tries to circle back in a way that you kind of go, oh, I didn't really need this. But, again, a really interesting 90s experiment, and I am glad I watched something that was not necessarily a, you know, more traditional watches. So, thank you again for joining me. I'll see you again tomorrow.